In the last talk, we looked at something most of us never question: the belief that we are either selfish or selfless, and how both of those, underneath everything, are both survival strategies. We landed on this idea that there might be a third option, not a compromise between the two, not a better balance of giving and taking, something more foundational: responsibility for yourself. And that sounds reasonable. Of course it does. Take responsibility, own your experience, stop waiting for someone else to fix it. That is common sense. But I've been noticing that when most of us hear take responsibility for yourself, we hear something very specific. We hear take responsibility for your results, fix the outcome, manage the situation, control how things land. And that is not what I'm talking about. Of course, we default to results. That is what we were taught. Most of us were raised inside systems, families, schools, teams, clubs, where your value was tied to what you produced. What did you accomplish? What did you fix? What did you handle? If the outcome was good, you were good. If the outcome was bad, you needed to try harder. So, of course, responsibility can sound like fix it. Of course, it sounds like another assignment. That's not a misunderstanding. That's a well-trained nervous system doing exactly what it learned to do. But here's what happens when responsibility only points at results. We try to control things we can't control. We try to control other people's reactions. We try to control how situations unfold. We try to control what people think of us. And when we can't, which is most of the time, we feel like we've failed. Not because we actually failed, but because we were aiming at the wrong target. The result was never ours to own. What is ours to own is the experience we're having inside the result. And that's a very different kind of responsibility. What if responsibility doesn't mean fixing the outcome? What if it means being honest about the experience you're having and noticing what's present? Because here's the thing I keep coming back to. Our experience isn't actually determined by what happens to us. It is determined by the meaning we give to what happens to us. Two people can sit in the same meeting, hear the same feedback, and walk out with completely different experiences. Not because one of them is stronger, not because one of them is more resilient, because the meaning they assigned was different. One heard you're not good enough. The other heard, there's something to adjust. Same event, different experience. And the meaning wasn't chosen consciously. It was assigned by the nervous system, by what safety means to that person, by what they learned to protect against, by the frame they've been living inside for so long that it doesn't feel like a frame anymore. It just feels like reality. Now, I want to be careful here because your experience is created by the meaning you give it can easily sound like just think better thoughts. And that is not what I am saying. I am not asking anyone to reframe. I am not asking anyone to choose a better interpretation. I am saying, notice that there is an interpretation running. That's different. Choosing a new frame is a strategy. Seeing the frame you're already running is awareness. And awareness changes the field in ways that strategy can't. When we don't see the frame, we assume the problem is out there. So we direct all of our attention to fixing out there. And this is where we create conflict for ourselves. Because we're solving for the pain the situation created instead of finding solutions in the actual problem. We're fighting the experience instead of being with it. And that fight takes everything we have. So let's look at how we actually handle our own experience. Because most of us have a few default strategies, and none of them work the way we think they do. The first one I'll call bypassing. And this is the Achilles heel of high performers. If you've built a life on your ability to think, to analyze, to strategize, to solve, to reframe, then when something uncomfortable shows up inside you, you do what's always worked. You think your way through it. You reframe it. You put it in perspective. You tell yourself it's not that bad. You compare it to someone who has it worse. You find the lesson and you turn it into growth. And all of that sounds like emotional intelligence. But notice what actually happened. The feeling showed up, and before it could land, before you could actually be with it, you translated it into a thought. You moved it from the body to the mind. Because the mind is where you feel safest. The mind is where you've always been in control. So the feeling gets processed, managed, understood. But it doesn't get felt. There's another version of this that's even harder to see. Instead of thinking your way out of the feeling, you redirect it towards someone else. I might feel terrible inside, But if I can make someone else feel better, I'll feel better too. So the uncomfortable feeling shows up, and instead of staying with it, you go help someone. You check on a friend, you solve a colleague's problem, you absorb your partner's mood, you make yourself useful. And the relief is real for a moment. Because focusing on someone else's experience is a very effective way to leave your own. This is where the selfless pattern from the last talk meets bypassing. It's not just a giving pattern, it's an exit strategy. I can't be with myself, so I'll be with your problem instead. And over time, this becomes something quieter. It becomes the need for external validation. If I can't generate a sense of being okay from the inside, I need someone else to confirm it from the outside. Did I do a good job? Are you happy with me? Are we okay? Those aren't just questions. They're bids for regulation. They're asking someone else to do the thing we were never taught to do for ourselves. Make the inside feel safe. And when we organize our lives around that, around getting our safety from other people's approval, we end up exactly where the last talk described. Codependent, depleted, wondering why nothing ever feels mutual. Not because we're doing something wrong, but because we skipped a step. We went outward for something that can only be built inward. And no amount of external approval will ever replace the experience of being okay in your own company. And here's why all of this is so hard to see if you're someone who's built their life on competence. Because your ability to figure things out, to handle, to manage, to perform isn't just a skill, it's who you think you are. It's your identity, your personality. All the beliefs, assumptions, values that you've assembled over a lifetime into a coherent sense of self. I can handle this. I can figure this out. I'm the one who stays calm. I'm the one who sees clearly. I'm the one who doesn't fall apart. That identity kept you alive. It earned you respect. It gave you a role. It made you valuable. So when someone says, you can't think your way out of this one, that doesn't just sound like a new approach. It sounds like a threat. Because if thinking doesn't work here, and thinking is who I am, then who am I in this moment? And that question is so uncomfortable that most people will bypass harder rather than sit in it. They'll reframe faster, analyze deeper, find more sophisticated explanations. Not because it's working, but because the alternative, not knowing, feels like falling. And you don't fall. That's not who you are. Here's the thing about identity, though. We want different outcomes. We want to feel different. We want our experience to change. But we don't want to give up who we think we are in order to get there. And that's the mind. Because the personality, the collection of beliefs and strategies we've organized ourselves around, is exactly what's creating the experience we want to change. We're asking for a different output while insisting on the same operating system. And the operating system is the thing. The second default is one we talked about in an earlier episode: harshness. When bypassing eventually stops working, when you can't outthink the feeling anymore, the system swings. And instead of going soft, it goes hard. What's wrong with me? Why can't I get past this? Other people handle this. Why can't I? I should be further along than this. The belief underneath harshness is if I'm hard enough on myself, I'll eventually become someone I can tolerate being. Pressure will fix me. Criticism will sharpen me. If I don't let up, I'll finally arrive at that version of myself that doesn't feel like this. And that works in the way that endurance works. You can survive it. You can function inside it. You can even produce from it. But harshness doesn't create safety. It creates endurance. And endurance has a shelf life. When it runs out, it doesn't announce itself. It shows up as the leader who suddenly can't make a decision, the parent who snaps over nothing, the person who used to love their work and now can't remember why. That's not weakness. That's the expiration of a strategy that was never meant to be permanent. Here's what I've been noticing, though. Most people don't do one or the other. They swing. They bypass until it stops working. Then they get hard on themselves. Oh, I should be past this by now. Then back to bypassing. Oh, I'm fine. I've processed it. I've moved on. And then back to harshness when the feeling surfaces again. Oh, what's wrong with me? And sometimes, in between, they swing outward into someone else's crisis, into productivity, into being needed. Soft, hard, outward. Soft, hard, outward. Avoid the feeling. Attack yourself for having it. Go help someone else so you don't have to feel it. And the whole time, the one thing that never happens is the simple thing. Just being with it. Not explaining it, not attacking it, not outsourcing it to someone else's problem, not translating it into something the mind can manage. Just staying. And the reason that never happens is the same reason we talked about last time. Being with yourself was never made safe. Notice what happens in the body right now when I say that. Just being with yourself. For some people, there's an immediate tightening, a bracing, a pulling away. For some people, the mind immediately starts working. Okay, how do I do that? What's the technique? And for some people, there's blankness, as if the question doesn't compute. All of those are information. They're telling you what your nervous system believes about being in your own company. Bypassing has a feel in the body. It feels like lifting, like rising above, like the attention moves up and out into the head, into explanation, into the reframe. The chest stays tight, the jaw holds, but the mind moves on. Harshness has a different feel. It feels like pressing down, like constriction, like the whole system gets smaller and harder. The shoulders round, the breath gets shallow, and the internal tone turns cold. And then the outward swing, the one where you redirect towards someone else, that has a feel too. It feels like leaning forward, like scanning, like the attention leaves the body entirely and goes looking for someone who needs something. You might not even notice it as leaving. It feels productive. It feels generous. It feels like you. But the body went quiet. Not because it's settled, because you left. And staying, actually staying, has its own feel too. It's softer than you'd expect. Not soft in the way that bypassing is soft, not the softness of avoidance, but soft in the way your body gets when you stop bracing against something. The breath deepens. The chest opens. The hands relax. Not because you've done anything, because you stopped resisting. Here's the thing nobody tells high performers. You can outperform your circumstances. You can outwork your competition. You can outthink most problems. But you cannot outrun your own experience. Wherever you go, there it is. You can change the job. You can change the relationship. You can change the city, the strategy, the routine. And for a while, it feels different because the context changed. But the meaning-making system came with you. The frame came with you. The nervous system's definition of safety came with you. And eventually, in the new job, the new relationship, the new city, the same experience shows up. Not because you're broken, because you brought yourself. And that's not a problem. That is the starting place. This is what the last talk was pointing towards when it said most of what we call addiction or distraction is just someone trying to get a break from themselves. And the reason they need a break is that being with themselves was never made safe. You can't get a break from yourself. The scroll doesn't work. The drink doesn't last. The overwork just delays it. Helping someone else just postpones it. You put the phone down. You wake up in the morning. You finish the project. The person you help goes home. And here you are. Still. Again. Still. So, what would it actually take for being with yourself to be safe? Not conceptually, not as a philosophy. In the body. Right now, what would it take? I think it starts with something very small. Not a practice, not a protocol, not even a decision. Just a moment where you don't leave. A feeling shows up, and instead of explaining it away, instead of attacking yourself for having it, instead of going to fix someone else's problem, you just listen. Not to fix anything, not to understand it, not to make it productive, just to hear what's already there. That listening is different from thinking about the feeling. Thinking about a feeling is what the mind does to keep control. Listening is what happens when control softens. And the body knows the difference. The body always knows whether you're performing understanding or actually being with yourself. You can't fake presence. You can think about presence. You can talk about presence. You can build an entire identity around being present. But the body knows. And when you actually stay, not because you should, not because someone told you to, but because you just didn't leave this time, something shifts. Not dramatically. The feeling doesn't vanish. The situation doesn't change. But the relationship changes. You, in relationship to yourself, changes. Because for the first time, the experience was allowed to be here without anyone trying to fix it, flee it, or weaponize it. And the nervous system notices that. Not through thinking, through experience. It learns, I stayed, and nothing catastrophic happened. That's not a reframe. That's data. And data the nervous system collects through experience is worth more than any insight the mind can produce. So this is where we are. The binary from the last talk, selfish or selfless, gave us two options, both survival. The third option, responsibility for your own experience, is the one nobody taught us. And when we try to take that responsibility, we default to the strategies we know. We bypass, we think our way through, we reframe, redirect towards someone else. Or we get harsh. We attack ourselves for still being here. And we swing between the two. soft, hard, outward, soft, hard, outward. And through all of it, the one move that would actually change something is the one we skip. Staying. Being with what's here. Listening. Not to solve, but to hear. And here's the quiet truth underneath all of it. You are never going to escape yourself. Not through thinking, not through achieving, not through numbing, and not through helping someone else. You are always going to end up right here, in your own company, with whatever you're feeling, with whatever meaning you've given it. And the question was never, how do I get away from this? The question was always, what would it be like to stay? Not forever, not perfectly, just for a moment longer than usual. Without the bypass, without the harshness, without the exit through someone else's need. Just you. Here. If you're curious about what this actually looks like, not as a concept, but as an experience, check the description for more details. I'm not suggesting you do anything differently. I'm not saying stop thinking. I'm not saying stop helping. I'm not saying stop working hard. I'm just noticing that most of us have been trying to take responsibility for our results while abandoning responsibility for our experience. And the exhaustion that creates, the pendulum between being too soft and too hard, the constant need for someone else to tell us we're okay, the quiet war with ourselves that never quite ends. That's not a character flaw. That's the natural consequence of never learning to be in your own company without trying to be somewhere else. Here you are. That's not a problem. That's the beginning. You don't need to take this anywhere. You don't need to do anything with it. You don't need to stay with yourself perfectly starting now. Just noticing the strategies, the bypass, the harshness, the outward swing, and noticing what it would feel like not to use them for a moment. That's enough for now. Nothing has gone wrong. I'll leave it here.